go ahead.
Yeah, you seem more optimistic than I think than many of us would be about what will happen if the Labour Party get into power. They were extremely cosy with the city, obviously, over a long time, and with large corporations. And I think some of us will be a bit more sceptical about what they're actually going to do when they get back into power. I mean, if they really thought this was a big cause, then wouldn't they have taken it up? Wouldn't they be shouting from the rooftops? They're saying we need cuts, but we shouldn't have gone so fast. But shouldn't they be saying, well, actually, a lot of these cuts we don't need because we can actually collect it in, from taxes that are uncollected. The fact that they're not saying that doesn't fill me with confidence about what they're actually going to do when they get into, if they get back into power in a short time. And isn't this partly because, aren't you possibly underestimating the lobbying power of the City of London and and big business generally, in terms of them being able to stifle that kind of opposition to what they're doing?
If I wasn't an optimist, I couldn't do this job, I guess. If I didn't have a very long-term perspective, I couldn't do this job. It was very interesting when some of UK Uncut got involved. They thought they were campaigning for something where they were looking at a sort of a fortnight's deadline for change. And they were a bit surprised when John and I said that we work on decade horizons and are quite comfortable with decade horizons. And when I'm 54, I'm planning to do this for another 30 years. My wife reckons that actually she'll put me in a box with one of these in case I've got another blog still to do. She's probably right. I'm sure I'll have something to say afterwards. I might leave one just in case. The afterword. Waiting. But look, I'm not naive about Labour. There are some parts of Labour which, frankly, they and I are on no common ground at all. The right wing of Labour and I are nowhere near each other. There are members of the Labour Party, there are senior people in the Labour Party who I think are actually trying to do some very interesting things. I think Ed Miliband is a much more intelligent man and a much better leader of the Labour Party than he's given credit for based upon what I see. I think there's an awareness in Labour which I am becoming increasingly aware of, that they see that there are actually multiple constituencies out there which they need to play to and which are vital to their re-election, and they realise that actually this isn't the old-fashioned triangulation, this is actually about going out, as I said, for Barack Obama it was going to get the Hispanic vote and so on, and actually realising those audiences have a completely different agenda and can swing elections now. And that the city is maybe much less powerful than thought. The collapse of the austerity agenda for George Osborne has been enormously powerful, because it has completely undermined the argument that conventional economics is actually got all the answers. There was this almost universal consensus that Labour got it wrong and that therefore conventional economics got it right and austerity was the answer, and if only we did that, then we would get growth. Well, it's failed completely. It has severely damaged the credibility of economics. There is a void at the moment. Why I am optimistic, and it is optimism rather than fact, and let's be clear about it, is that I get a very strong feeling that there is an enormous desire for a new narrative, and that the demand for that is there, and when I can't talk about everything I do, I can't, but when I talk to some of the people I meet in Labour, I have this feeling that the appetite for the new narrative is very strong, and that they may be really moving towards it. There are obstacles. One is called Ed. I won't say any more than that.
I'm going to ask myself questions about blackmail.
There is obviously a problem. And Ed Balls did write an article last year about relationships with the city, which I thought was unfortunate. I think that's a fair way of putting it, because I certainly wouldn't have ever written an article like that, which overemphasised the importance of the city to the UK by far. I thought, we proved that it's not that important now, surely, haven't we? And even the city's now admitting that, and admitting that Occupy was right. I mean, when you get Andy Haldair saying your Occupy was right, come on, begin to wake up, guys. Surely we've had some awareness now of this. I think that's creeping through, but I may be wrong. But that's why I'm not committed to one party either. I'm not telling you to vote Labour. I will very happily go and talk to Labour, but I was carrying on talking to Caroline, who's easily the bravest politician I know in Parliament. I mean, I think Caroline's fantastic. Love her.
Claudine.
Sorry, I feel a little bit exasperated because what you've just actually outlined for me is what I've always suspected, that we can always rewrite your accounting rules, your tax rules to actually favour whichever way you are. So at the moment, where I think probably hope comes from, maybe from Europe, because they seem to actually be having...
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
European Union. I think they actually have some way of probably trying to actually change the circumstances that we actually have in the UK, where the city actually determines how everything is done. But, you know, hey-ho, Mr. Cameron will probably use his veto on those issues, which is another sad outcome. But I think, you know, we need a new narrative, like you said, and I think there is a need for people to be very informed. I think my view is that actually people in this country, we're not well informed.
Okay.
You know, we go to Starbucks, you know, whether we know they pay tax or not, people actually still use this companies to actually support them. I have like a, you know, Big Apple products, which, you know, we have to use our influence as consumers to actually shift the debate as well. I think that's actually very important. But, you know, it probably is quite a difficult position to be in, because it doesn't look like we'll actually be doing that anytime soon. But
Do you agree?
Briefly, look, I mean, first of all, obviously consumption is a massively important thing. You know, as a Quaker, I would like to say, you know, we should try and live simply anyway. It's one of the testimonies. And I try to, and I don't always succeed, because I'm human. I was interviewed by The Guardian this morning for Saturday's paper about, do I boycott Amazon? And I said, well, actually, I'm afraid to say that the place that sells more copies of this than anything else is Amazon. So, you know, actually, I'm making money out of Amazon. Do I completely avoid Amazon? No, because sometimes it's the only place I can find something that I want really quickly tomorrow morning, and I live in rural Norfolk, and there isn't a shop nearby to do everything, and it's very convenient to have it turn up in the post sometimes. And I actually went back to discuss with the journalist, who it turned out was almost exactly the same age as me, though I didn't realise that, the campaign against Barclays in the 1970s, which was, of course, about anti-apartheid. At the time when Barclays was not known for tax avoidance, but actually being in South Africa. And, you know, recalled my time standing outside as a student at Barclays Banks in Southampton in those days, where I was, campaigning on that issue. And I said, you know, the importance wasn't actually whether people were at Barclays or not to some degree. It was important actually that we created the awareness that Barclays was a bank associated with apartheid in South Africa, and it had a desperate reputation. At a meeting I was at on Tuesday night, the Chief Executive of the Institute of Chartered Accountants was present, as well as government ministers and so on. And he said that the thing that all companies fear is reputational risk. I mean, Starbucks' brand is now worth much less than it was before. They have had a significant negative impact. Starbucks is an absolute gift to us in this sense, because Starbucks is one you can walk by. You know, I was in Vauxhall this afternoon, and I could have come out, and there was the nearest coffee shop, and I needed somewhere to sit and to have a coffee, was Starbucks. And I walked on by. Because I won't go to Starbucks. Actually, I didn't really ever go to Starbucks, I don't like their coffee. But I mean, now I won't go to Starbucks, and I'm sure I'm not alone. That will have had an impact. Now, they don't necessarily know I walked on by. The issue is actually creating the perception that we're walking on by, which is what Barclays did. Barclays didn't lose much money over being boycotted ever. But, you know, lots of us of my age remember doing those campaigns, and it's never changed our perception of that bank. What we have to do is use the media and so on. It's more than consumer spending. I think consumer spending is vital with regard to my family's choices about where we buy our vegetables and God knows what else, and how we spend our money in our local economies, which we really try to do. I'm not sure that consumer boycotts per se actually create a great deal of change. But publicity, campaigning, UK Uncuts measures have been phenomenal in making a change. And I stand up in awe to what they did. And Occupy was just amazing. I mean, I just was so excited by Occupy. Being invited to speak at Kent City University was a damn sight better as far as I was concerned than being invited to speak at Cambridge University. Because it was just more significant. It was just much more significant. And I have lectured at Cambridge University. And do, every year normally.
That's lovely. You just
Yeah, but it does.
Just do it.
You don't have to ask my permission. Everything's on the record. I'm in favour of transparency. People say, is that on the record? I said, well, of course it
No,
was.
I didn't mean it in that sense. It was just a
Yeah.
rhetorical.
Okay, I've got 4 questions. I'll probably only get away with about 2.